Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm JT from Norfolk Fountain. Thanks for joining us. This week, we are joined by Emmett Armstrong, who is a StoryBrand guide and Webflow expert. And he's going to be walking us through the StoryBrand framework. So let me just end this poll. So most of us have never heard of it. One of us is an expert. I'm guessing that's you, Emmett. But yeah, so I'm not going to take up long here, so let me pass over to Emmett. But if there's any questions during the chat, feel free to drop them in the chat. Emmett's got a hard stop after this, so we might have a little bit of time for Q&A, but if you drop them in the chat, that means I can just get them all ready and lined up to pass over to Emmett. So the presentation is going to take 20, 30 minutes. Then we'll have a short time for Q&A. And then if you want to stick around, then we can have just a little networking session at the end. But that's about it. If you have any questions, do drop them in the chat. And I'm going to pass over to you, Emmett.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for having me, JT. Let me get my screen share going. I think you have to disable, let's see. It says you're sharing something as well.
I think I'm going to go ahead. Good work.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. I'm assuming everybody can see that. All right. So my name's Emmett. Thank you for having me. I'm about to present a slideshow that was given to me when I became a StoryBrand guide. This is sort of the overview of what is StoryBrand and how can it help you as you're marketing to your clients, customers, whoever you deal with. And let me just jump right in. So here's the deal. Most companies waste an enormous amount of money on marketing. So if you're in marketing, it's likely that you're wasting money. It's because they can't clearly communicate their purpose. People spend money on all sorts of things without focusing on the primary priority, which would be having a clear message. Why should a customer even do business with you? Why are they going to want to buy your product or use your service? And if you don't get that right, then you're wasting money. So one of the foundational beliefs that I have is that people don't necessarily buy the best products, but they understand the products and services. They buy the products and services that they can understand the fastest. So you might not be the best in the market, but if you can communicate clearly, then you're going to win customers and you're going to attract people to your brand. So we've all seen a website like this, right? It's very pretty. It's clean. It's got a modern font, nice photography, and all those things. And if you were to ask me how much money this costs, I would say at least $5,000 to $10,000 for a really clean website like this, especially if it was custom. But I don't think you could tell me what this company does. Artisan Innovative Solutions. What do they do? Are they a photography studio? There's a picture of a camera. Are they an event planner? Are they a web design firm? None of this information is clear. So good design does not equal clear message. And what we're looking to create is content, words, and pictures that make people want to buy and that make people understand our message. So this right here would be a waste of money because it's not clear and it doesn't attract customers to your message. Something to do with travel. Yeah. Yep. Something like that. But again, it could be anything really, right? Here we go. Okay. So people buy products only after they read words that make them want to buy those products. So that's what we're focusing on today, is how to create those words and to tell a clear story that makes people want to buy your product. And to be able to do this well, we need to understand how the human brain works. So when we're talking about the human brain in general, we have two priorities. First is to survive and thrive. The brain is trying to keep you alive, right? Trying to keep you alive and to get you what you need to survive and thrive. And then number two, it's trying to conserve calories. So what that might look like is if I offer to get JT a cup of coffee, My brain is thinking, I want to build this relationship because if there's a threat or if there's something that's going to go wrong, I want JT to be on my side. So there's something that happens in your brain. It's a survival mechanism, and it's unconscious, but it's happening in your brain and it's happening in your customers' brains as well. And if a customer doesn't hear information that connects with these priorities, they're not going to care about how your brand or your product fits into their story. And we have to do this quickly because of the second principle, which is that your brain wants to conserve calories. So if I'm going to spend 35 minutes telling you something, I need to make it clear, right? And if you're going to be talking to your customers, you need to get to the point quickly because their brain is trying to conserve calories and they don't want to hear people talking about my grandfather this and when I started my company that. So we want to present information that'll help our customers survive and thrive, and we want to do it quickly so that they can conserve calories. So I want you to think of every piece of information on your website or as you communicate to your customers, every piece of information is like handing them a bowling ball, a big, heavy bowling ball. And if you use inside language or language that's hard to understand, it's like a slippery bowling ball covered in Vaseline, for example. So when we hand the customer a bowling ball, you might say, we're going to hand you one bowling ball. This is one piece of information. And that's okay. People can handle one piece of information, and they might be able to handle two pieces of information. But if you start to say, yeah, we do integrated solutions and high power quality events and all these fancy words that you start to use, then you're handing them a third bowling ball. And what happens if you have three bowling balls, right? They're going to lose all of it. So they're not going to remember the first things that you said. They're going to just forget it. If it's too much, if you're not clear, they're just going to walk away. So the brand that communicates the simplest is going to win at the end of the day. And the way that we say it at StoryBrand is that if you confuse, you will lose. That's simple, right? It's clear. So why story? Well, story is a sense-making device. Our brains are wired in a way that connects quickly to stories and storytelling. And that's why we want to be able to learn how to harness that story framework and apply it to our brands. So think about when you watch a movie, right? It doesn't feel like 2 hours has gone by because you're engaged in a story and your brain enjoys that. It likes to have connection. It likes to have the story, and stories are powerful. And it's a very quick way of connecting with people. It's a powerful way of affecting emotions. And thankfully, stories are based on formulas. Many stories are based on formulas. And that's what we're going to talk about today is a formula that you can use for your brand to connect your story with your customers' need to survive and thrive. And we're going to do it quickly. We're going to do it clearly in a way that doesn't waste their time. It doesn't waste their mental energy. So that's what I want for you. I want customers to understand the role that you play in helping them survive and thrive. So this is the StoryBrand framework, the messaging framework. We have 7 parts. I know there's 8 bullet points here. This is just a fork in the road. So there's 7 points that I want to go through. And we'll start here at the beginning with the character. So the first thing that you want to do in your story is you want to define the character and what they want, right? That's the first thing we see when we start a movie. We see the main character. We see Jason Bourne washed up on a boat, or we see Frodo Baggins in the Shire. So we see the character. And when you're talking about your customers, we want them to see themselves. We want them to see a business owner, or for whatever your customer might be. They might be photographers, they might be parents, they might be business owners like me. But you want them to quickly say, oh, that's the main character. That's me. And you want to define it clearly. And once again, we want to define this character in simple terms. We don't want to say Jason Bourne, he wants to adopt a dog. He wants to lose 30 pounds. He wants to get the girl. Oh, and he wants to find his identity. We want to have one clear purpose and one clear desire for this character. So here's the principle. When you agitate a customer's desire, they enter into the story that your brand is telling. So define the character and define what that character wants. So parents want to be able to sleep through the night. There you go. That's the first step. The next point here on our StoryBrand journey is the problem. So right away, we want to cut right to the chase and talk about the problem. For example, the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, he finds out right away that his daughter has been kidnapped, and that's the whole premise of the movie. But imagine with me if that movie started out and said, oh, your daughter's been kidnapped and there's a big problem. And then 5 minutes later, he gets a phone call and says, oh, she's actually fine. And they end up going to Europe, and he travels the countryside with his daughter, and they go shopping and they go to a cafe. That would not be a very engaging story, right? Because there's no problem that we are invested in. So as soon as you solve the problem, the story is over. And what we want to do is to open up the story and use that problem to drive the rest of the story. So the story is what's going to give our, the problem is what's going to give our story fuel and motion. And this is where a lot of companies miss the mark, because they don't talk about the customer's problem. So they talk about how they solve things. They might say we provide solutions, but they don't say you have a problem. You as a customer have a problem. And that's what I want for you. So we want to be able to define the problem, and we want to talk about it frequently, because here's the second principle. If you stop talking about your customers' problems, they stop paying attention to your brand. And we've all been there, right? We've all talked to a company or a brand that they're trying to sell you something, and they forget that you're the customer. They start talking about, me as a salesman, I really need to make the sale. Or they talk about their father, how he started the company. And that's not what customers want. They want to talk about the problem, and they want to know how you can solve their problem. So let's move on to the third point, which is the guide. And that is you as the business owner. So you're not the main character. You are the guide that helps your customers, the main character, as the guide. So if the hero can solve their own problem in a story, then it's not a really interesting story, right? What would Luke Skywalker be without Obi-Wan Kenobi? He would be a farm boy stuck on a farm, a desert planet. We need those guides that can help us move through the problem. And that is where you come in. So you get to play the part of Qui-Gon Jinn and Gandalf and Yoda. You get to be the those were almost all Star Wars examples. But you get to be the wise leader, the guide that helps your customer solve their problem. So you don't want to play the main character. There's only room for one main character in a story. And if you take that role, then your customers are going to say, great, have fun. You live your story. That's not my story. I don't care about that. But as soon as you make the customer the focus, or client, or whoever, I'm using customer, but it's the person that you are serving. As soon as you make them the main character, then they're invested, because they have a desire and they have a problem, and you're the person that can help them solve that problem. So the principle for the third step is that the customer is the hero of the story, and not you and not your brand. So you are here to serve your customers. You're here to guide them along their journey. And how do we do that? We are going to create a clear plan for our main character. It's a plan to get them to success, and it's going to be clear, short, simple steps, and it's going to be given to the customer by you. And just like we talked about with the bowling ball example, you can't make it too complicated, because as soon as it's too complicated, they're going to just abandon the whole journey that you want to take them on. So you want to be clear. You want to get the customer to say, oh, I sounds like something I could do. So step one, fill out this form or schedule a call. Okay, that's not so bad. Step two, give us your information. Okay, step two, I can do that. So you need to give simple, clear next steps. We call them calls to action, or we call them, three-step plans. But you as the guide are giving them a plan. So for example, in Lord of the Rings, Gandalf says, you must take the ring to Mordor. So it's the guide that gives the hero the thing that they need to solve the problem. Fourth, this principle here is that the customer needs an easy step-by-step plan to move forward, or they won't move forward. So if it's not clear the next step that they need to do, they're not going to be able to move through the story that we have for them. Okay. So there's a plan, and then the important part of that plan is the first step, which is the actual call to action. And we've split this out because it's so important. So it's not enough to just have a plan. There needs to be a call to action. So it's not just 3 steps to success. It's 3 steps to success and click here. Start now. Learn more. Maybe that's kind of a weak call to action, but we want to say buy now and tell the customer that there's an actual step that they're going to need to take. So you will lose money if you do not have a clear next step that the customer can take and a call to take that step as well. So just imagine if you were on a date, for example, or if you wanted to go on a date, you would ask that person, will you go on a date with me? You wouldn't ask them, do you want to learn more? So if it's not clear, the customers will not move forward. Unless you clearly call people to action, they will not take action. So let's review. We've got a character with a problem. So let's say parents who want to get more sleep, because I have a 2-year-old. So let's say parents who want to get more sleep, they're going to meet a guide. They're going to meet a company that makes sound machines, and these sound machines are going to help the baby sleep through the night. So this company will be the guide, and they will say, if you are a parent with a problem, we're here to help. And there's a 3-step plan. Step 1, tell us what type of noises you like. Step 2, choose the color. Step 3, buy now, step 3, enter your information. And then the call to action would be buy now. And then we want to paint a picture of success, right? People want to put themselves in this success mindset, or they want to imagine themselves smiling and happy, right? So you say, if you do this, if you move forward and buy now, you will sleep through the night. And you might show a picture of a parent resting their head on the pillow. You might show that as well. So people want to move towards pictures and visions of success. And that's what the guide is there for. They are there to remind this main character that if they do their job correctly and that there are stakes, right? This is what this tower icon is for. It's to remind you of the stakes. So there's success. And then the next step we're going to talk about is failure. But we want the success step to be super, super clear, right? Like JFK is a good example. He said, we're going to put a man on the moon within 10 years. And that was a very clear success story, right? Nobody knew how that was going to happen. He didn't have to come up with the plan at that moment as the leader, but he did say, here is a clear picture of success. So that's what we want to do with our customers. We want to give them very clear, just imagine what your life would look like if you worked with us, if you bought this product. You will be smiling and happy, and you are going to survive and thrive, just like we talked about. Customers want us to cast a vision of what their lives can look like if they used our products and services. So we see this all the time in marketing. It's really an important skill, is to be able to cast the vision, but it's important to also build up the story to support that. So the last step is failure. And we talked about stakes, right? So if you buy our product, you will succeed. And if you do not buy our product, you will fail. So it's important to remind your customer slightly of that failure step. So it's not a huge note that we want to hammer on over and over. It's more like just a few pinches of salt, right? So we want to use a lot of flour, which is success, and then a few pinches of salt as the failure step, if that baking analogy makes sense. But really, if there's no stakes and there's no problem, then there's no story. So if there's no Death Star that's going to destroy Alderaan and destroy the Rebel base, then there's no reason for Luke Skywalker to go on this journey. So if there's no stakes, the customer isn't going to move forward. And if you're not reminding your customers of success and failure, they're not going to be interested, because they don't want to just know about your backstory as the guide. And they don't want to just know about what you're going to sell them. They want to know how it's going to make their life better, or how their life might be worse without it. So if there are no consequences for not doing business with you, there is no reason to do business with you. And again, just be cautious of this. People don't want to hear this over and over and over, doom and gloom, right? But you need to remind people, like in my business, I do a lot of web design. So I can often just say, your website is slow. And if you don't take care of this, you're probably losing customers because nobody wants to wait around for a slow website. And that's as much as I would say, but it's a good reason. And people understand it. They say, yeah, you're right. And that drives them to move forward in the story. So here's the questions. For the desire, the main character, we want to say, what do our customers want? What are our customers' problems? Internal, external, philosophical. Have we positioned our brand as the hero to the guide? And have we created a clear plan for that hero to win the day? Whatever that means for you and your brand. And do we have clear calls to action with clear success and failure? Have we helped our hero imagine how we can improve their lives and identified the consequences that they will avoid? So take a screenshot of this. Remember these questions. These are questions you want to ask for every piece of story that you have in your brand. Really, when you think about your overall brand story, these are important questions as you define who your main character is, how you can help them, what you want them to do, and how their life is going to be better or worse if they do or do not sign up with your company. And here's an example of this. If you go to mystorybrand.com, there in the chat, there's actually a free tool you can sign up for that helps you create this plan. It gives you these blank forms. There's some resources, and then it gives you blanks to fill in as you're going to write this for your customer. So I use this quite a bit when I'm working with companies. I'll spin up one of these forms and then I'll fill out all the data, and it's put out right by StoryBrand. It's really great information, and it creates this one sheet presentation that you can use to clarify your message and to present it to others as well. So here's an example. This is a site sort of before the StoryBrand process. This is a pretty typical site. You might see something like this, right? We strengthen your business. Equify Asset Services. It says the company name. It's just kind of boring. It's a financial services website, and there's a lot of content, right? There's not a really clear, there's multiple calls to action. View inventory, contact us today, call us, all these things. So it's pretty confusing what you should do, how you can use this service, why you should use this service. There's so much data. It's not clear. It's burning a lot of calories for your brain to try to look at this site and to understand what's going on. So this is the StoryBrand version. There's a very clear primary call to action. There's a secondary call to action up there. There's pictures of smiling, happy people, and there's clear stakes, clear benefits for doing business with this company. So isn't this so much better? Isn't this a much better presentation of that company's story? So that's what I want for you. Next steps for anybody that's interested. Let me just skip through these. Oops. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's got to play the animation. So there's a book that's written by Donald Miller called Building a Story Brand. And that's a great place to start for a deeper framework, a deeper understanding of this framework. I've given you a quick overview, but the book is really a great place to start. So that's step one. Step two is actually to go to mystorybrand.com and create a brand script for your company or for your clients or whoever it may be. Anybody that needs to communicate better to customers will be helped with this brand script. And then the last step is to actually take the information and use it to tell a better story. So create a brand script and use it to clarify your marketing material so that it connects with your customers clearly, simply, and without wasting their brain energy. So just remember, if you confuse, you will lose. And we want to be able to clarify our messages so that customers will pay more attention. So that's the end of the slideshow. I'm happy to do any questions or roundtable networking, like you said, JT. But thank you again for having me. And if you do want to connect with me, I'll put my email and my Twitter handle here in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. That was amazing. So I actually do have a question on the framework. The failure step, is that failure for if they fail to sign up with your company, or is that if you fail to convert them?
It's basically how they will fail if they're left on their own. So,
okay, yeah.
So if they don't take action, or if they don't complete the steps of the plan, then they risk failing.
Okay, yeah.
You kind of want to think about it. What would happen if they were left on their own? Like if they didn't work with you or they didn't buy your product, then their house might burn down, or their car might run out of gas, or whatever it might be. You want to give them some options of what might go wrong. Sabine says, is there any scenario that the StoryBrand framework might not work for? I have found a few situations, I think specifically for creative problem solving. What I mean is I work with design studios and branding studios, and the product that they sell is creativity. They're selling design solutions. They're selling very highly subjective products, and the stories that you want to tell, it's kind of like, well, you need a creative partner to solve this problem, but sometimes this framework is a little rigid and it doesn't exactly present the right success and failure when you're talking about creative work. So I think creative work is probably the hardest to apply this scenario. It works really well for concrete, tangible things like a lawyer or a web designer or financial advisor or small businesses, things like that. It works really, really well.
I don't know if Richie has his hand up for a question.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for this and for this presentation. Two questions. Do you think that the story brand fits in a VSL, in a video sales letter? And you mentioned that we should speak about failure, but not too much. But in the sales letter, usually we speak about the pain if they don't go with that service that we are providing, or with the pain, for example, of not losing weight in general. And usually pain drives them to take more action than showing them the success. So when you do brand awareness, do you focus mostly on success? And why don't you focus more on the avoidance of failure?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that we describe this in the StoryBrand framework is that they're kind of like notes on a piano. And to play a song, you need all the notes, but sometimes you're going to play different notes depending on what you're trying to get the customer to do. And I think especially in a sales letter, you're absolutely right that sometimes the sense of failure does drive the customer to buy a little bit more. So I think the main point is that you do need to have all these ingredients developed, but there are times where it's more appropriate to highlight one part of the framework versus another part. And it all works together well to create an overall story, I suppose. But it's like having that overall strategy is the part that's important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but from your experience, you think that speaking less about failure has worked for you?
I think people want to focus more on success than they want to focus on failure. So they don't want to work with someone that just preaches doom and gloom all the time. And when you have a very new relationship, when they're just learning about your company, they want to know how you can give them more success versus how you're going to give them failure. So if you were selling smoke detectors, you wouldn't put a picture of a house burning down on the front page of your website. You would put a picture of a safe house with happy people running around alive and not a house burning down with corpses or whatever. So that's kind of the point. That was a little dramatic, but you want to focus more towards the success at the end of the rainbow.
Right. And my second part of the question is, some brand stories have so many purposes. Let's say sometimes you want to convert, so you have to have a specific call to action. Let's say buy now or sign up or try to subscribe. But sometimes you want to build some of the awareness, so that's why you use learn more. When you were saying be firm with your call to action, how do you promote awareness then?
Well, you construct multiple calls to action. It's okay to have multiple, but you need to have the next step to do business with you always at the front of your mind. So that would be the primary call to action, which is buy now or schedule a call. And then the secondary call to action would be just what you're saying, how to build more awareness. And those are good for sure. So when you're getting to know someone, you wouldn't say, will you marry me? You would say, let's get to know each other first. So that's kind of the same paradigm. If the customer's not quite ready to buy, you want to give them probably one or two secondary things that they can do. StoryBrand is fairly rigid on this. They don't recommend multiple secondary calls to action. They don't recommend read blog post number 1 or case study number 3 or PDF number 7. They basically say there's a buy now button and then there's a sort of a lead magnet. We can get more into depth. I can do another webinar about how they do their marketing funnels, but they recommend one secondary call to action with a clear lead magnet, like 5 tips to better sleep at night or something like that.
All right. Thank you so much, Emmett.
Let's see. Is a one-page website a standard use for this application or for this approach? One-page websites are great. Let's see. It doesn't have to be one page. I think the StoryBrand framework works really well on the homepage. They have some wireframes and some examples of how they think websites should be designed, but you can do a whole website with this, but it's more just for I would actually say it's probably more about the sequence of events. So really, we know a brand new customer is going to land on your homepage and they're going to scroll down your homepage, and that's where you want your story to be. So if it's one page, then great. If it's multiple pages, at least have the story clear on the homepage. Quick win for us in the audience. What would be the most common mistake for most businesses that I wish would disappear from the surface of the earth? Probably the most common mistake is that the header, the hero call to action and the hero headline is not clear. It's either kind of fluffy. What do I mean? It uses unclear language because the brand thinks that it's a cool way to say something. They'll use 3 words like happy, healthy, and I don't know, I can't think of a third word, but they'll be cute with their language and they'll forget that they need to be clear, first of all. So on my website, I say I build websites right up front, because that's the important thing that I want people to know. If they don't know anything else, that's what I want them to know first. So I think that's the most common mistake, and that's the quickest win, is to evaluate the very first thing, the biggest thing that you say right at the top of your website, and make sure that it clearly explains what you do, really. Because if it says something like happy days ahead, whatever, then you're not telling the customers what you do. The framework has 3 steps and then a call to action. Why is 3 a magic number, or is this flexible? For example, some scenarios might be 5 steps. So 3 is a magic number. 3 things. Our brain is formulated to remember 3 things better than it can remember 4 things or 5 things. People can definitely remember 3 steps. maybe remember 4 steps, and they will not remember 5 steps. They will not remember 5 company values. They're not going to remember 5 key takeaways. So this is just writing in general. This is what I do. I always try to boil it down to 3 steps, because the more you go above the 3-step mark, first of all, it shows to me that you can't prioritize things. If someone says there are 10 top priorities, no, there are 3 priorities, maybe. You got to say, these are the 3 things that we're going to work on. So that's how, especially if a customer doesn't really know your brand very well, they're not very invested, 3 things is about the most that you want to ask them to do. So that's my perspective. I know some people like to have more framework, or they have more bullet points, and sometimes you can't say things in 3 steps. But in that case, use the 3 most important things and then subdivide them within those 3 categories. So you might say web design, copywriting, and web development. Those are the 3 things. And then within that, I do the StoryBrand copywriting, I do technical copywriting, and I do micro copy. Those are 3 subpoints. And then there's 3 subpoints for those other points. So if you really need it, then you can divide it further there. But I always try to roll things up to 3 points.